for joining me here today at Sports Matters. As that video showed, football has changed rather a lot in the last 25 years. I was wondering if you could maybe tell us what you think the biggest changes in the game have been in that period.
Obviously, the biggest change is what's happening up top more than anything, the way that, on a marketing point of view, the way clubs are trying to push themselves, especially now living in this region and seeing that every club is trying to push themselves out here. I just don't mean Premier League, clubs from Europe as well. Even had New York Cosmos a few years ago were trying to push themselves. You would look on the playing point of view, the players have changed their whole persona, their attitudes have changed from 20 years ago. I don't want to say that because that makes me feel really old when I say that as well. But the game has changed immensely at all levels, even the fans. The fans, I think there's a different level even for Premier League fans, the way they conduct themselves. I mean, I went back to the UK 2 weeks ago and actually went to Huddersfield v Queen's Park Rangers.
Okay, yeah.
When I was actually back in the UK over 6 years ago when I was living there, would I have actually gone to Huddersfield to watch Queen's Park Rangers? The answer would have been not a chance. Not unless I suddenly was thrown in a time capsule and just ended up in Huddersfield. But I ended up going, my old team, Queen's Park Rangers, and I was staying around Manchester, so I drove there. I went to the game and it was so relaxed. I got out of the car, walked to the ground, sit inside. It was so easy. It was just nice to walk up and everyone's friendly. Got a little bit more service but from people and everyone was generally nice, and you walk into the ground and it was just pleasant. The thing that killed it was the 90 minutes of football. It was just completely different because...
Football always ruins it.
Because I think in certain ways you get used to the technical game, but I saw players being whacked and they got up and they carried on, they tried to carry... I was seeing all the bits I don't see from the Premier League anymore. I was seeing bits that reminded me of myself and reminded me of players I play with, how we were. But it was just that whole game and the football that we saw wasn't what we see in the Premier League, the technical side, and we just saw players who were blood and guts. We saw Huddersfield fans never, they sang and they sang their drums going, they never stopped. There was an atmosphere, a friendly, vibrant atmosphere. When you see Premier League fans now, they're very conservative, very conservative. I think that stems from the lounges, all that plush bit where people now, if you shout and scream, hold on a minute, someone next to you.
It's going to be trouble.
If I was shouting and screaming now and you were sitting next to me, oh my God, I'm doing something stupid here. There's not that freedom anymore with supporters because the Premier League has taken that little bit away from them because of the fact of, you know, Joe, John, Fred and Bill have moved to other seats around the stadium. So that bit's been lost as well.
Sure. I wanted to touch a bit on transfer fees because obviously it's gone mad, particularly in the Premier League. And last summer we saw John Stones is subject to a £30 million bid from Chelsea. And I went and had a quick look at his record, his playing record, and I think he's got less than 50 top-flight appearances. And then I went and looked at your record prior to your move to Man United, and I think you've had in excess of 275 first-team appearances and moved for about 2 million, I think. So I was wondering if you could maybe give us a bit of insight into what you reckon the inflation, why there's so much inflation in player prices.
Well, the problem we've got now is that Englishmen are judged more, and their price kind of works more on them being English or British, I should say, more than their ability. That's what it's about, because squads now, you've got to have a certain amount of homegrown talent. You know, you look at Sterling. Was Sterling worth that money? No, he wasn't. Potentially, there might be the opportunity, as we saw Ronaldo when he left Manchester United for late 70s, maybe £80 million. But because he had proved himself over 4 seasons, the last 3 seasons that Ronaldo had was unbelievable because he dragged Manchester United along on his own. When you see Sterling, you think, but Sterling had kind of set that 1 season playing with Suarez, definitely sold it. But you look at Stones, you look what he's done, and you think to yourself, no, because he's English. Definitely, because that was the main bit of it, not being disrespectful to him. But he hasn't really learnt the game yet in the Premier League. We don't really know how good he is at this moment in time, more than anything, how good he's going to be. When I was 21 years of age, I was playing for Fulham, and Liverpool come in for me, and Liverpool offered £250,000 to me at 21. And the chairman at the time, we had a man called Ernie Clay, and he owned a company called Marley Homes, which are based, I think, based around Yorkshire. He was a proud Yorkshireman. So they offered 250. So I jumped in my car with my agent then and drove all the way up to the M6 and stopped at a place called Knutsford Services to meet someone from Liverpool to chat and to go from there. Yeah. By the time I'd got to Knutsford Services and stopped, the Liverpool person I was meeting has said, sorry, the deal's off. I said, what? And my agent said, what's wrong? And he said, well, Fulham have asked for extra 50,000. So I kind of went, well, surely we can negotiate and do something. So that must be done. And I was desperate because it was Liverpool at the time. Yeah. Liverpool were the kings of Europe, and it was, wow, everyone's dream to, you know, just to play for Liverpool. Sure. I hadn't actually worked out at the time that it meant I had to move and live in Liverpool. That hadn't come into my head, me being a Londoner. But that was the long and short of it. And what it boiled down to, and I went all the way back, and obviously you sulk a bit, and I went and saw Ernie Clay, and I said, you know, what was the reasons? Why was it? He goes, Liverpool wouldn't pay for potential. They'd set a price, and that was it, and they wouldn't move. They didn't want to pay the extra 50,000 for potential. And when you look at football now, people are willing to pay an extra £20 million without, you know, for potential. They're gambling on the fact. You look at Manchester United, what they've done with the French boy. It's about potential. There might be opportunity to go and do it. So it's like they're virtually investing in land, hoping that the green belt's going to get lifted, that they can put a property on it. Yeah. And that's what they're doing now. But the game allows you to do that, because you know every single time when the rights come round is that someone's going to throw a lot of money into the pot for clubs to have, and so they can gamble with it. Sure.
During your time at United, Roy Keane was signed for 3.75 million, and he was a British record at the time. I was wondering what you thought Keane might be worth today, in today's prices.
Is that value off the pitch or on it?
Preferably on
the pitch. Yeah. Roy, I mean, I can't put a price in it. Roy, but I have to say, Roy is a different style of midfield player that people would want today. The game doesn't allow a Roy Keane to play in it anymore. Sure. In that sense, the way he played the game, he was definitely a powerhouse away playing. They'd be looking for a more technical player than Roy, but if you wouldn't have put a price on Roy, you'll be talking in excess of 30 million, because Roy would give you someone who'd run from Roy wouldn't like a description of a defensive midfield player. Roy wouldn't like a description of an attacking midfield player. Roy was just all about being all over the park. And if he ran past you to make a tackle and you made that tackle, he would virtually let you know how far he's run to go past you and say, and virtually call you lazy. That's how Roy was. Roy would chase everything down. So Roy didn't have he was a midfield player, and he'd done everything. There wasn't anything that Roy couldn't do. So Roy was one of those players that was invaluable. So 3.7, you say 3.7?
3.75, yeah.
Yeah, in 1993. That's when he started, Roy. Roy met us, we was in South Africa, we was in Joburg on a tour. Roy met us. After that first night of us, Roy had a quick nickname, was Smash, because all he kept saying every time was, I'm bleep bleep smashed, because Roy could not put down a bottle of Castle. And at the time, with the way the rand was at the time, I think it was like 12-1 it was against the pound. So I think the bottle was costing about 40 pence. So Roy took full value of it, to be perfectly honest. And Roy wasn't the brightest either as well in certain contexts. Because him and Lee Sharp went out one time into Manchester City Centre. Roy saw a watch and he brought a watch. He saw the watch come up, it cost him, he saw this watch, he come and train next day, and Sharpie's gone, Roy's got this watch. How much he paid for it? He said it's cost him 14. So he showed it all off to us, and wow, 1,400, wow. Brilliant, Roy, brilliant 1,400. Everyone's gone, but it's a Rolex. Roy never realised it cost him £14,000. But he'd given his card over and paid £14,000 for a watch. For everyone's going, wow, like that. But for us, we suddenly turned around, the other lads in the dressing room, we said, how much is he earning?
Yeah.
And that's the first, how much is he getting? Why aren't we getting that money?
So did that create problems in the dressing room?
No, not at all. No, not at all. Not with Roy, because at the end of the day, we saw Roy what he was, and he was judged of what he was as a player, so it wasn't about money. And at the end of the day, I was lucky enough on the back of it, he won me an extra 4 medals, so I'm not going to complain.
One of the other things that's changed a lot is boot deals. So professional players today, the top players particularly, get paid quite a lot of money by sportswear brands to wear boots. I was wondering, did you ever have a boot deal in your time?
Yeah, my first boot deal was with Adidas, and that's when I was at Fulham. I got into the under-21 England squad, so straight away Adidas come along, and they wanted me to wear their boots, so they gave me a massive deal of £600 and as much clobber as I could get, which I thought was great, £600. The only problem is I could never get hold of the fella to get any gear. I was always, because I played for Fulham. And then, lucky enough for me, when I signed for Essex, I signed to Essex about 18 months before I went to the World Cup in 1990, and Essex were brilliant. But then I signed for a massive deal for Essex over like a 4-year deal, and that was like about £5,000. But you know, as far as that was it. I was there.
You'd arrived.
I was surpassing everyone. The only bonus was though is that there was only me and Chris Waddle who were actually wearing Essex at the time. I'm sure Chris was getting more. Chris was at Marseille, but no one else had it. No one else was wearing Essex. It was athlete's gear, and it was all right. I mean, walking around in tight tracksuit bottoms and all that wasn't really me, to be honest. But it was just the trainers, and the boots were made out of kangaroo skin, and you couldn't hardly buy them in the UK. So I was wearing something different. So it worked out all right for me. But you know, players now are earning their boot deals. I'd be happy with it just as a yearly wage, to be perfectly honest, what they're getting in boot deals.
Yeah, sure. You mentioned Italia 90 then. I'm a firm believer that was a massive turning point for football, particularly in the UK. Suddenly it was all right to like football after that World Cup. But I was wondering if you noticed that as a player, like when you arrived back from that World Cup, whether you saw a change in the way that football was perceived by the general public. I'm definitely not one to blow my own trumpet, but I just believe during that spell over that June period into July is that those 6 weeks of football changed everyone's opinion about football, because everyone hated football. Not hated it, but everyone had a bad taste in their mouth about English football, what our fans had done, things that have been going on. And that World Cup, even though we didn't win it, but it helped football. Football is where it is today because of what happened in 1990. Because people were watching football who weren't even football fans. There's people who watch football now who are not football fans because of the Premier League sold it. I don't think there'd be a Premier League, or the league wouldn't be that strong if it wasn't what happened in 1990. That completely changed everyone's feeling about football. I mean, I was walking around where people knew maybe the name of Paul Parker at Queen's Park Rangers to where people knew the face. You know, at one point I went back to the same supermarket where I was living. I was living in a place called Wokenham in Berkshire, and it was a Safeways supermarket. I walked in there where before I'd just go and do a bit of shopping and the odd person asking me the question, "Are you?" That might have been because I might have been the only black person living in Wokenham at the time. But all of a sudden then they'll go and they'll see me. Wow. But then when I walked in there after the World Cup, they stopped all the tills and I had to do a signing session in a supermarket in Wokenham. So that was something different from people, the odd person, to everybody knowing that I lived in Wokenham from that World Cup. Even the road I lived in a place called Woos Hill, which is an estate there, they had the welcome home party for me. Oh, right.
Big banners up. But after about an hour and a half, I had to go because, one, I was tired. I think I was emotionally tired. And I think 3 beers and I was drunk. So I had to go. I left them all out there partying. I was absolutely done. That was when I just got back. We just landed at Luton and I got back after that. So football changed. Definitely, I think, World Cup definitely added to something that's going on now. It definitely was one of the integral parts, the World Cup, to why the Premier League now is what it is.
Sure. One of the other big developments, obviously, is social media. Do you think it's a good thing for footballers to be involved in social media?
No, I think it's wrong. We've seen it so many times, and I'm going to come out and say it doesn't do me many favours. I have to say that footballers, we ain't always seen as the brightest in the world. So why do you suddenly want to go and start speaking on things and talking? Because you're going to slip up. And too many players now are slipping up. And I think a lot of people out there are fed up about players maybe talking about themselves, what they've got and what they're doing next. And then it allows as well individuals to come on there, especially in Twitter, to come in there, go bang, bang, and then suddenly cut their account, which is a cop-out, which is feeble. But I don't know why players get involved. I think clubs have got to stop it. Stop players doing it. It's easy to do, but I think clubs are scared of doing it. English clubs are scared of stopping their players, stopping them freedom of speech or whatever they want to call it. I think it's a problem that's got to be quelled. They've got to stop them doing it. Facebook and what goes on there, that's a little bit different, but definitely Twitter has to stop on a player's perspective.
Sure. Well, we nearly have time, so just one more question. Do you think we'll ever see the likes of Sir Alex Ferguson again in the game?
No, it's impossible for that to happen, the same as it's impossible for a top club ever to produce what Manchester United produced in 1992 with all those young players. The game doesn't allow, with a player point of view, managers ain't going to be brave enough to bring that many young players through at one time. A manager's not going to feel strong enough and safe enough in his job to go and to take that opportunity. On the manager's point of view, a manager's never going to be given that time to be able to allow him to go to that level.
Sure.
There's not a chance of that happening again. Even now, we look at it, we've seen what's happening with Marina at the moment in time.
Yeah.
Even if we see Man City win it, is Pellegrini going to be allowed that time? No, he's not, because every time there's always going to be a certain manager at Bayern Munich who everyone's going to keep, the press are going to keep pushing to knock on his door for that job.
Sure.
So the press are not going to allow anyone to follow Sir Alex at that moment in time. Because you've got to remember at that time as well, football was at a different level to what it was now. It was the late 80s into the 90s, and there wasn't that much pressure, so much pressure on managers. There was at Manchester United to succeed, but every club now, every manager is under pressure. And that goes right the way through, because even at non-league level, I think what's happening at the top is affecting non-league level now, because even the owners of non-league clubs, and I know this because my good friend is a manager of a side in the Bandarama, league there, in that top league in non-league football. He's in there, and he's under pressure to sack his manager, because so much, success is important, and it's actually seeping right the way through the football world.
Sure.
And the football in the UK.
Sure. Okay, well, that's great. Thanks very much for joining us today, Paul.
Thank you.
It's Paul Parker, everybody. Thank you.